So you've decided it's time to go and buy that commercial property that you're looking at. But how do you work out what it's actually worth? Well, welcome. I'm Peter Bender from Bundaberg Commercial, and that's the topic of this week's video. We're actually going to do this video a little bit differently because valuing a property is complex work. Now, a good real estate agent, and I do consider myself in that category, can usually get between 5 to 10% of the valuation of what a property should be worth. So give or take 5%. But sometimes you need to have more than that, especially if you're looking at things that are worth, properties that are worth, over $500,000 to $1 million. So what I did this week is I phoned a friend. So I contacted my mates at John Logan Valuers, who are based in Bundaberg. They're one of the many valuers that I work, so it's not a paid ad or anything like that. It's just some guys that I've worked with for a long time and I trust their judgment. And I said, if I throw you some answers, can you give me one of the guys to join me in a video? Valuers are very shy people. So I couldn't actually get them to come to the video, but I did manage to get Corey to give me some answers to the questions, and he's put them in writing for me. So what I'm going to do is read out the questions and the answers, and rather than have it board, we'll have it with subtitles and we'll have some screenshots in the background just to keep some variety. Otherwise you're going to get pretty bored with me pretty quickly. Alright, so the first question I asked them is, what does a valuer actually do? And Corey explains that a valuer provides an assessment of market value. The Australian Property Institute defines market value as the estimated amount for which an asset or liability should exchange on the valuation date between a willing buyer and a willing seller in an arm's length transaction. After proper marketing and where the parties had each acted knowledgeably, prudently and without compulsion. We provide valuations to various different parties for a variety of purposes. Some examples include valuations for various accounting activities such as stamp duty, capital gains tax or SMSF reporting, etc. Valuations are also undertaken for a broad range of other matters such as resumption compensation, family law property settlements, insurance, etc. Generally, most people will require a valuation for mortgage security purposes, whether it be when the property is purchased or for refinancing existing properties. Commonly, the bank will rely on the valuation as part of their process in determining the lending exposure for a loan. Banks will normally have a higher exposure to a residential property compared to a commercial, industrial or rural loan. A brief overview of the valuation process would be summarised as physically inspecting the property. This allows the valuer to understand the asset which is being valued. The inspection will involve taking notes on various details such as construction styles, quality of finishes, fit out, land attributes, location attributes, etc. Photographs are commonly included to support the written descriptions in the report. Obtaining and reviewing documents. Typical documents required for a commercial valuation include leases, details of outgoings, council rates, building, insurance, etc., contract of sale, title search, etc. It is a requirement of some banks to cite copies of contaminated land searches, asbestos reports, and other documents depending on the type of property. Market analysis. This involves researching sales and rental evidence of properties similar to the subject, which can be used to draw conclusions relative to an assessed value. Reporting process. After the inspection, review of documents and market research, all details are detailed in a valuation report along with disclaimers, assumptions and other comments. What would be a normal methodology for valuing commercial property? Valuation reports will typically contain two valuation approaches, the most common being income approach and market approach. The income approach involves capitalising the net income. As such, the two variables are the net rental and the capitalisation rate. If a property is leased, it is important to distinguish between gross rental and a net rental. A net rental is basically the income back to the landlord or owner after expenses are accounted for. If a lease identifies a rental, however the tenant does not pay additional money to cover outgoings, it is referred to as a gross rental. In these instances, the outgoings need to be subtracted from the gross rental to calculate a net income. The net income is also expressed exclusive of GST. Depending on the property type and certain circumstances, Outgoings can be council rates, building insurance premium, land tax, annual maintenance, management costs, etc. Depending on the property, there may be body corporate costs to consider. Also, multi-tenanted properties may have additional costs relative to common areas, such as electricity and cleaning, etc. Some leases will identify a rental and also specify the tenant is responsible to pay additional money to cover 100% of outgoings. This will be referred to as a net lease, where the landlord will keep all the rent money as the tenant pays for the outgoings. It is important to read the lease. However, as the tenant may be responsible for part of the outgoings but not all the outgoings. For example, the tenant may be required to pay 100% of building insurance, but the landlord will have to cover all other outgoings. For properties which are vacant or owner-occupied, the valuer will adopt a market rental. An assessment of market rental is normally undertaken on a dollar rate per square metre. This rate is informed by lease evidence of similar properties which have been leased recently. A rental assessment will consider the location, land, size, quality of improvements, availability of car parking, etc. The capitalisation rate is a single figure expressed as a percentage which incorporates various elements such as security of income, lease terms and conditions, level of rental, tenant, quality of improvements, appeal of location, etc. In simple terms, the capitalisation rate is a function of risk versus reward. Basically, the riskier the asset, the higher the return, or cap rate, one would expect to receive. Conversely, the safer the asset, the lower the return, or cap rate, one may be willing to accept. An example of this in regional Queensland will be properties which are specifically developed for and leased to national, international fast food brands, such as McDonald's, KFC, etc. These properties are often receiving yields or cap rates below 6% and sometimes below 5%. The low yields are due to the perceived security, stability of the tenant and the income. At the other end of the spectrum is lower quality commercial properties which may experience difficulty securing long-term tenants due to any number of reasons, such as isolated location, poorly presented improvements, etc. As such, these assets will be considered more risky and attract yields often above 8% and beyond. The application of an appropriate cap rate will be informed by comparing the various attributes of the subject property to recent sales evidence. The other common approach used in commercial valuations is the market approach, sometimes referred to as a direct comparison. This method involves comparing the subject property to sales evidence on an overall total value or on a dollar rate per square metre of land or land building area. In a perfect world, these two approaches should result in similar cohesive valuation figures. Another factor to consider for commercial property valuations, especially valuations prepared for mortgage security purposes, if the property is vacant or owner-occupied, or even has a lease with a short term remaining on it, there may be a requirement to provide an indication of value on a vacant possession basis. For a mortgage security valuation, this will typically be a process of deducting letting up costs from a fully leased asset value. An assessment on a vacant possession basis will normally be lower than an assessment of a leased property or leased basis. Depending on the circumstances, letting up costs can include an allowance for a vacancy period, incentives offered to obtain a tenant quickly, holding costs, and agent's commission, etc. What trends are you seeing in the local market? The commercial and industrial market has been improving over the past few years. Compared to pre-COVID, the increased activity has generally had a positive impact on values and rentals, although the main street, Bourbon Street, remains somewhat sluggish in Bundaberg. Good quality properties with leases to national brand tenants typically attract good interest from investors. External investors are a common buyer of these assets. In general, there appears to be a relative lack of commercial industrial properties listed for sale, especially better quality properties. Industrial assets have been performing particularly well in recent years. Most of the prime industrial land in Bundaberg has been purchased, with many projects under construction, especially in the Joanna Boulevard precinct. The Bundaberg CBD and older commercial areas of the town can experience a degree of volatility between properties. In these areas, there are large variances in quality of improvements and tenants or leases. As with all valuation, it's important to assess each property on its merits and not apply broad sweeping approaches to any segment of the market. And then I asked Corey if there are any other comments that he wants to add rather than just the questions that I gave him. This is Peter, to be bluntly honest, valuation is not an exact science. Nevertheless, the valuation provided is not merely a subjective opinion based on a best guess rationale. Rather, it should be supported by a body of objective evidence outlined in the report. On this matter, I would also comment that valuers rely on settled market transactions, not merely listings. It is our general experience that agents will commonly include a premium in most listings to provide for a degree of negotiating leverage, or perhaps a special buyer, such as an adjoining owner who may be prepared to pay a higher level of value to get the property, rather than risk losing it to another buyer. No doubt, as you would be aware, there are also low sale prices, such as quick disposal by a deceased estate, or maybe a transaction under forced circumstances, such as a mortgagee in possession. The evidence can be complicated. However, a valuer needs to sift through this data to identify the best evidence that supports a market approach in accordance with the definition above. So that's the material that I got from Corey from John Logan and Associates, some valuers that I do some work with, and I'm very much appreciative that Corey took the time and effort to go out on a limb. I would have loved if I could get him live on the screen, but they're quiet guys, these valuers. But it's important work that they do, and I will quite often use it. The other part that they may not have mentioned is if you have a complex sale or purchase, don't be shy to bring in a valuer. It might cost you $3,000 or so, but if you're looking at a deal that's worth $500,000, if you can get a 10% variance, that's $50,000. That's money really well spent. And especially in regional areas, like Corey says, it's not rocket science. It's actually quite complicated. And no real estate agent is going to be able to give you the full rundown of what a property is valued. Valuers, they have insurance to make sure that they cover their answers correctly and do a lot of hard work. That's why they're popular with the banks. That's why they're popular with businesses with complex arrangements. And that's why I do a lot of work with them. So hopefully this information is giving you a bit of an understanding on who they are, what they do, and how they actually get their material together, as well as a few interesting tidbits and trends and future forecasts for what they're looking for. All right, so till next week, take care and God bless.